Hello and welcome to the Writers of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. Today we are at Salt Lake City Fanatics Convention, and we're with a very special guest, someone who I've not seen for a couple of years because he was in deployment over in the Middle East for the last multiple years. He's a Writers of the Future winner. Please welcome Mr. Brad Torgersen.
Hey, thanks, John. I appreciate it.
So we'll break this into two sections. The beginning is the curve from beginning of being a wannabe writer to winning the contest, and then post that. And so let's just kick it off now with what was like that got you on the start to becoming a writer.
So as a teenager, I read a lot, as probably most of the winners do, but I didn't really take it seriously until I was happened to do a little bit of scripting for a homespun radio serial here in Salt Lake at KRCL FM. It's a public radio station. Just as something fun to do.
Yeah.
It was unpaid, but at the same time I was doing that, I was reading Larry Niven, who's one of the contest judges, and was really getting into his short fiction.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, Larry does this for real, meaning it's his profession. I wondered how much harder I'd have to work. Turns out it was a lot harder. So I was probably a teenager, 18 years old. So for the next 17 years, many rejection slips, a lot of trial and error and frustration and failure, and the standard teething that most writers, at least in the old days, before indie publishing, went through. And I didn't actually enter the contest until probably, I want to think it was 2007.
Yeah.
At the urging of a few friends, because one thing my wife had said to me in 2005, she said, "Well, what more can you do that you haven't tried yet or that you haven't done?" And a few of my friends were like, "Why don't you do Writers of the Future?" And I wasn't terribly familiar with the contest. They said, "Look it up. Here's the website."
Yeah.
And I, of course, immediately went out and did my homework and started reading the anthologies and got excited because I said, "Oh, I might have a shot with this," especially since Dean Wesley Smith, who's one of the contest judges, way back then had been editing a series of Star Trek fan fiction anthologies called I think it was Strange New Worlds, and I came close on a couple of stories there, so I'd had some encouragement from him. He was one of the people that was encouraging people to do Writers of the Future, so I started entering. Of course, I didn't score right away. It took, I think, another two and a half years of honorable mentions, and finally I got my first finalist in I think Joni Labaki called me in 2009. I want to say early 2009. And even that didn't win, which crushed me. I'll be honest, that crushed me. I was so crushed. It was the best thing I'd ever written, and I was so happy with it. And when it got finalist, I was like, oh, finally, something good's going to come of this. And it didn't win, and I was just, I moped around for about a day, and my wife was like, well, you got to keep trying. So I did, and got another finalist the same year that did win. The finalist that didn't, that was a neat story because after winning the contest with the second finalist, which went into volume 26, 26.
Yeah.
The story that didn't win, I still sent it to Analog Magazine, to editor Stan Schmidt, and I said, Stan, Dave Wolverton over at the contest really enjoyed this. He thought it was good. I thought it was good. Maybe you will too. So then I get a letter back in January. This is January 2010, and he said, I do like this, and I'm going to publish it. Not only did he publish it, but it won the Reader's Choice Award. So pretty much everything that I've done that's been Writers of the Future related has had little magic fairy dust sprinkled on it because it's always done really well for me. So it's always a treat to represent the contest now, 10 years later. The Dragon Award, of course, being the most recent and exciting thing. Contest judge Larry Niven presented me with that last weekend, which was a great thrill and a great honor. And for everybody listening that voted, I appreciate you voting, whether you voted for me or not. The Dragons I love because they're open to everybody. Everybody can vote on the Dragons. It's, in my opinion, a true gauge of fan enthusiasm, which I think is very important.
Yep.
And, of course, Writers of the Future has been woven into my career ever since. I've been back several times as a kind of a returning winner. A few years ago, I would help shepherd the new winners around through their contest week. There's there's quite a few of us out here in Utah that are prior winners.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only one of them. There's probably at least a good half a dozen
that are here, at the show doing signings at our booth.
They're around. So
good. So, at what point did your deployment? When did that kick in?
So I'm in the Army Reserve. I'm a Chief Warrant Officer. I'd actually gone to candidate school the same year. A lot of things happened in 2009 that were important to me. One of them was candidate school, because that's where you transition from being a sergeant to a warrant officer. So I had gone and done that. But the deployments didn't hit until, I think, 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
I got deployed overseas for about a year with a joint task force over in the Middle East. Came back for a couple of years and then got deployed again back to the Middle East. Of course, that's standard Army. You go anywhere, you're probably going to the Middle East.
Yeah.
I am most recently back from that just a few weeks ago. And that's where I actually finished writing the book that won the Dragon Award. I was on deployment when Tony Weisskopf at Bain Books was politely poking me, saying, "We really need to do this book. Are you done with it yet?" So it was a challenge getting it done on deployment. But I got it done, and it's done well for me.
We've had a lot of entrants and a lot of winners, and obviously a lot of fans that are in the military. So let's talk a little about that. So now, how did you work out doing your writing while you were deployed?
It's actually a little bit easier than being at home, because when you're home, your civilian job, your family, church stuff, whatever you've got going on reasserts itself. Military life is different, especially if you're deployed, because when you're not on the clock, and granted, it can be long days, like the first deployment, it was 12-hour days, 6-7 days a week. But when you're not sitting there doing your job, your time is yours.
Right.
So and there's nowhere else to go. It's not like you're out sightseeing.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there in your cot or your bunk or whatever you happen to have, and what are you going to do? Okay, well, pull out the laptop and do a couple thousand words. So in that way, deployment is almost good for you. At least it was for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, being back home, it's like everything reasserts itself. Everybody wants a piece of your time. Events like this are time-consuming. Obviously, they're not. It's fun coming to events like this, but they're not great for writing, because for the 3 or 4 or 5 days you do these events, you can't really write.
Yeah.
But it's still good to be back. I'm glad to be home. It's fun, especially now with the Dragon Award win. People are, hey, congratulations, and of course the books are selling and things are going well. So, in terms of end of tour awards, the Dragon is the best thing I could have hoped for. I'm happy about it.
Absolutely, that was awesome. So, Rise of the Future is a short story competition, and you're writing novels. So, how did that transition? How did it help, or did it help being able to? What about Rise of the Future helped that prepared you for novels?
Well, I think, and those that win, this gets reinforced at the workshop. You have that quarterly deadline, so it teaches you how to get used to having a deadline. It forces you to not sit on the same story forever and ever. You got to have something new to produce every 3 months. So it kind of trains you in the professional mold of, you've got a deadline, you've got to put out regular new work on a regular basis, things of that nature. Which, in my opinion, people learn way more from producing new work than they do endlessly polishing the same old piece. I know a lot of aspiring writers, including myself, fall into that. Even in my experience, that was one thing I changed, is instead of trying to, quotes, make the story better over and over the same story, I just said, you know what? I'm going to, kind of a 3 passes and I'm done. So that was a big shift for me, was to disengage from the old work and constantly be producing something new. That helped me enormously.
Yeah.
And it was all because of the contest, because you got to turn something new in every 90 days. I also had access to a couple of the people that would be judges eventually, Christine Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith. They weren't judges yet in 2009, I don't think.
No, they weren't.
But they were soon to be.
Yeah.
And they had roots in the contest too. So
he was the first person to be presented an award on Volume 1, Dean.
Yeah.
Very first person
I've
ever
read
to be
that
awarded.
story. It's a good story.
Yeah.
So, so Dean was one of the people encouraging me to do the Writers of the Future. And so I kind of had a little bit of advanced knowledge from them that eventually shows up in the workshops. In fact, I want to say In volume 26, there's an essay, I think, from Dean Wesley Smith right next to my story, if I remember correctly, in the book. So even that was neat, So one of my guys that's kind of a mentor, I ended up having an essay of his right next to my story. That was a real treat. But yeah, it forces you as an aspiring writer to get used to deadlines, to produce new work on a regular basis, to send it out. That's the other thing new writers, everyone, or maybe not everyone, but many people get in the habit of just not, they get stage fright, so they don't send it out. It's not good enough to send yet. I don't dare send it. I need to polish it one more time. That doesn't work, in my opinion. If people will stay on it and produce something new every 4 months, well, one of the winners that I admire that's a new winner is Wolf Moon.
Yeah.
He's got a great story because he entered many times. I want to say he got something like 10 honorable mentions, a couple silver honorable mentions. I don't know how many times he was a finalist, but he was extremely proud of his win, as well he should be.
Oh, for sure. 25 times he entered.
Yeah, so he just stayed on it and was regular and entered. And that's the other thing I think it teaches new aspiring writers is persistence wins. It's not necessarily about being the most talented person in the world, as they will tell you. The instructors will tell you that. It's, talent is everywhere. Everyone has talent, but not everybody has work ethic. Not everybody has persistence. Mm-hmm. Not everybody will make themselves sit in the chair day after day, getting some kind of work done on a new story. And then, of course, they have to have the courage to actually send it to the contest. And then they have to have the courage, and again, Wolf is a good recent example, of when they get that honorable mention or whatever, to say, you know what, I'm not going to be discouraged. Now, I will say this, the honorable mention is a beautiful thing if you're an aspiring writer.
Yeah. Because
you're like, wow, and you find out you're in the top 10%. So to find out you're top 10% in the judging and they get thousands of manuscripts for me was really a morale booster. So I love those honorable mentions. And then, of course, once I made finalist, it was just a through-the-roof moment. As a guy that had been trying for many years and had struggled, to finally make finalist was a really big deal. And, of course, then the win. The win was, I still remember the afternoon I got the call on the win. It was a surreal moment because for years and years and years I had wanted so badly to have that moment and know what it felt like.
Yeah.
And when it finally hit, I remember it was in November 2009, Joni Labaki called me, and I was actually at a drive-thru at a restaurant, and the phone rang, and who's calling me? And I picked it up, and hey, this is Joni, Brad, guess what? And I was like, I was expecting her to say, you didn't win because my previous finalist hadn't win. And I said, oh yeah, it didn't make it, huh? And she said, no, you're a winner. And I was like, wow. I mean, I was floored. I was absolutely floored. I said, I'm so sorry. I'm here in a drive-thru picking up my order, and I can't believe this. So I pulled over and we chatted, and I was gushing, and it was surreal. Yeah, it was very few things have been as satisfying for me than the Writers of the Future win. Very few things.
Yeah.
That was one of the two things that year that was just a wow. Of course, the other one was graduating candidate school, which was just like Writers of the Future. It was this horrendous amount of effort to achieve something, and to finally achieve it was very satisfying.
That's awesome. So now, the transition from short fiction to novels?
So that's still a process for me. I feel like a natural short story writer. Contest judge Mike Resnick and Resnick presented me with my trophy, and he didn't know me from Adam at the time, but he presented me with my trophy, which was a huge honor. So I've had the good luck of having him present me with my Writers of the Future win, and then contest judge Larry Niven presented me with my Dragon win.
Yeah.
So here again, the contest people are, the judges
everywhere.
They're part of my experience in the publishing world.
Yes.
But Mike got to be good friends with me, and he's like, yeah, you're a natural short story guy. I've had to teach myself to go longer on novels. I do think the skill set helps, though, because learning to write short stories, you have to have economy of words and brevity. You have to really be able to snag your reader and bring them into the story quickly.
Right.
With books, you get a little more leeway, but I still think it's good to have that skill set so that when somebody picks up your book and reads it, even if all they do is read the back blurb, if you can get skilled at doing a very good back blurb, because publishers frequently will come to you first if they want the back blurb, not always, but they'll come to you and say, well, what do you think it should say? If you can get good at writing those even, that's a good way to suck your reader in. I mean, it's all about enticing them to say, you know what, this might be a good story. And if you can get them in quickly and keep them in, you'll keep them for the whole book. So I think shorts help you with that. Again, short fiction I enjoy anyway. Larry Niven is a big reason for that, because he was a very, very skilled short fiction writer. Still is, in my opinion.
Yep.
And I've always admired that. So I deliberately patterned my skill set after Larry, and it's, for me, it's done quite well. The short stories have been a great calling card. So again, the contest was a good proving ground to hone my craft and again have those deadlines and yeah. Now that I'm doing the books, it's a lot of fun because that's the other side of the publishing. In fact, that's the bigger side of it, because the audience wants the books. They want books specifically in series. That's very common. So to be able to do books in series, and publishing with Baen, of course, is a great treat. I like Baen a lot.
Yep.
Major science fiction publisher. They published David Weber, who also won a Dragon last weekend. It's a thrill. But again, all of that happened because I cracked it with Writers of the Future. It all started there. So, what can I say?
That's great.
That was the beginning, was 2009, winning Writers of the Future.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about the book you just won your Dragon Award for.
So A Star-Wheeled Sky is a hard science fiction novel wrapped up with some military science fiction elements and some big ideas. The kernel of it, or the nugget maybe that I would put out to readers would be, it's the far future. Humanity is in a little closed network of stars because after losing Earth, a long ago war has driven humanity away from Earth. They don't even know where Earth is anymore, but they've discovered this. It's called the Waywork. It's a little network of stars that an alien superhighway system has been constructed to link them all together. So instead of taking hundreds of years to go from star to star, they can go very quickly. It's a faster than light system. They can use it. They don't know how it works. And it's kind of contained in a bubble of about 50-odd, 60-odd solar systems. But because it's a contained system, of course, there's competition for resources. Human nature being what it is, there's competition between warring factions. The story itself is about a disgraced flag officer who's trying to redeem herself, who has been charged with shepherding the daughter of royalty, who is also a specialist on the alien technology. But they have to employ some civilian ships that have been drafted into the military service using the son of a interstellar shipping magnate. And they're up against basically kind of a military governor, an oligarch from a rival empire. And they're all racing to find the secret of the alien technology because for the first time in about 1,000 years in this universe, a new waypoint on the Waywork has appeared. So never before has that ever happened. It's a chance for one government to try to escape and find a game changer that will help them against the big tyranny that is swallowing everything up. And for the military governor in the tyranny, it's her chance, she hopes, to seize this alien technology, to use it not only against her enemies, but to use it to climb the ladder and seize ultimate power, within the empire that she's part of. So
right.
that's kind of the gist of the story. It's done really well. I've gotten lots of good reader comments on it. I got a beautiful piece of cover art from Alan Pollock, professional artist. He's done a lot of covers for Baen Books and other publishers. Beautiful artwork. I've gotten so much good commentary on that. I've been a fan of the artwork ever since I saw it 2 years ago. Just brilliant. And yeah, it's part of a series. Book 2 and Book 3 I'm working on right now. It continues the story. Book 1 is kind of Act 1 of what I envisioned to be a 3-act larger story.
Yeah.
I talked about that on a different podcast earlier today, describing how in Western fiction we have the 3-act play, and you'll see that replicated in the book. There's 3 parts in the book, broken down into chapters. The books themselves are 3 parts of a bigger story, and then the story even goes beyond that to where there might be multiple series. But it all starts with reader enthusiasm for Book 1, so it's been really good. Again, the Dragon Award is a huge kick in the pants. reader comments continue to be good. Word of mouth continues to be good, so I'm enjoying it. From an author standpoint, it's a great deal of fun having a book like that, getting that much attention.
So you're going to stick with this one, or are you going to run anything else parallel with this?
I'm contemplating. There's a series that writer Larry Correia, he's a bestseller that works with Baen. Larry Correia and I have been floating a concept for a few years that might end up being an alternate history, kind of swords and sorcery fantasy, but it's going to be an Earth-based kind of idea. I call it Norse America, where I posit that 1,000 years ago, when the Viking Age is actually happening, magic is real, the frost giants are real, they're driving everyone out of Northern Europe, and they're coming down to crush everyone. And I posit that the Vikings flee first to Iceland and then flee over into Greenland and then ultimately to Vinland, tracing the original kind of settlements that they did, but there's way more of them. And, of course, they run into conflict with the mound-building First Peoples that are up and down the East Coast and into the Ohio Valley and places like that. And, of course, magic is wound through this idea. And I postulated an Aztec blood god coming up from Mexico driving his armies. You know, Larry's a good guy to talk to about this stuff because he thinks on that level, too, very, very well. And writes brilliant books in fantasy. Yeah, so that's the concept.
Yeah.
That is the concept. I have Baen's interest on the concept. I have some notes. I've done a bunch of research because it's. I still want it to be true alt history, so I'm trying to get my research right with some of the facts I need. That's one that I definitely want to pursue with Baen. When am I going to have the time for it? I'm trying to squeeze that in now that I'm back from deployment. We'll see how successful I am.
Absolutely. So, in terms of aspiring writers, what tips would you have? What would you say is like a really important thing from your perspective for them?
For people who are brand new, have never written anything before, I would say decide what you want to do with it. Decide what your ultimate ambition is. And if your ambition is to be a professional writer, pay attention to the people that you admire most. Go back through your library, find the ones that you like the most, that you're like, wow, I just love this writer so much. Because those people are going to be your templates. So have your templates, pay attention to what you think they're doing. Definitely set yourself up, I would say, to entering the contest. Yeah. I mean, I tell people that all the time. At events like this and workshops and elsewhere, I always tell everybody to enter, because the other thing about the contest is you're not competing with other professionals to get published. It's designed for new writers to have a chance, and for the reward that you get, it's just phenomenal. You get the workshop week, you get all expenses paid, you get the award ceremony, which is brilliant and better done than any award in science fiction. And I've won some awards. I can tell you nothing has ever been as awe-inspiring as the contest. And then the key thing is to write a lot. There's an old saying, your first million words. That was true for me. It took about, when I won Writers of the Future, I went through and added it up. I had about 850,000 unpublished words that were unpublishable in hindsight. And that was my practice. Now, not everybody's going to need that much practice, but most people need some kind of practice. Nobody, or very few people, I should say, are very proficient right out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
And that's normal. That's fine. But it's got to be done. And it won't be done by polishing the same little story or the same little book manuscript. I see that all over the place. Don't be a polisher. Don't think I'm going to write this book and I'm going to keep making it better and better and better. That's a project of diminishing returns. That doesn't work. Set that manuscript aside if that's what you've been doing already. Work on something totally new. A new universe, a new project, a new character, whatever it is. Do something new. For me, that was a game changer when I started doing that.
Yeah.
If you can get a chance to do a workshop, especially with some of the contest judges, Kevin J. Anderson does some good workshops. Christine Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith do some good workshops. Yep. There's no problem at all with doing those workshops. I did Chris and Dean's workshops even before I did the Writers of the Future workshop. So if you can do one of those, that's another thing I would recommend. Going to conventions like this and meeting other pro writers.
Yep.
Talking to them. I mean, that was something else I did different. For many years, I never went to any conventions. I never went to any workshops. I never did any of that. So in 2005, my wife was like, well, what can we have you try that's new? And I had never done that. So I started going to conventions and did a couple workshops, and it made a difference. I think too many writers they get locked in their heads and they just write their stories, and they'll talk to their friends, but they may not talk to professionals enough to start getting awareness of what's possible in the professional world. Yeah. Of course, with indie publishing now, it's all different. Anybody can publish anything, but as contest judge Kevin J. Anderson always says at his workshop, which is a beautiful workshop, I really am a fan of Superstars. But anyway, he will say the same thing every time. Publishing is now easier than it's ever been. Success is still hard because you can publish all you want, but can you tell a story? This is where, again, the practice. If people can enter the contest on a regular basis and get their practice in, it will help them enormously to actually get better at telling stories. Not writing per se. Mm-hmm. I think writing is an overlapping skill set, but can you tell a story? Especially some of the judges like Eric Flint, they can tell a damn good story.
Yeah.
That is how they have such a huge audience like they do. It's a different skill set from writing, so that's what you want to teach yourself is, can you tell a story? Something else I would say to the aspirers that are entering Writers of the Future is definitely get the most recent 2 or 3 volumes. Go online, Amazon, wherever you're going to buy them. I used to buy mine at Barnes & Noble. Wherever you can get your hands on the latest, the very latest 2 or 3, and read those. And you won't, and I'm talking to the audience when I say this, you won't like every single story in every single volume because they won't necessarily be to your taste.
Yeah.
But you will generally find 3 or 4 that you're like, wow, that was really good. I really liked that. Those are the ones, and they'll be different for each person.
Yeah.
A dozen entrants will read each volume and pick different stories that they're favorites. Those are the ones that I tell the entrants to really pay attention to, reread a couple times, 2, 3, 4 times, whatever, and then let it percolate around in the back of your subconscious and try to think almost on a subliminal level, what about that story worked for you? And again, I'm using ubiquitous you for whoever's listening. What about that story worked for you? It wasn't a contest story, but I remember one thing right before I got my finalists. There was a story called Arkfall by Carolyn Ives Gilman. Beautiful story. I think I read it in Fantasy and Science Fiction or Asimov's. I can't remember where I read it. I want to say it won a Nebula or might have won a Hugo. I can't remember. But it was a gorgeous story, beautiful story. And one of the things I did, because I was reading the contest, I want to say volumes 20 through 23 at the time, is I let Arkfall and some of those contest stories just sit on the back of my imagination for a few weeks. And when I sat down to write my next story, this was, I want to say fall of 2008, probably October, November.
Yeah.
I let those stories influence my new stuff. And the beautiful thing about it is literally that story that came out of that, that became my first finalist. And then that story went on to become the one that got published in Analog. And then that became the one that went on to win the the Reader's Choice Award. So it made a difference. Yeah. And I can't say that'll work for everybody, but again, reading the most recent volumes and picking the stories that work and just kind of fire up your imagination, those are the ones you want to pay attention to. Again, not every story in every single volume will do that, but there's usually at least 2 or 3 or more that anybody can look at and go, wow, that was really good.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that will help them kind of get on track for what probably will be something that'll get a silver honorable mention, maybe a semifinalist, maybe a finalist, or even a winner. It worked for me, so I always tell people to do that as well.
Good. Well, that's very, very good advice. So if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they find you?
They can go to Amazon. I'm all over Amazon. I've got a page there with all my books, and I'm in a great many anthologies. Website, bradrtorgersen.com. Amazon, I'm all over Amazon. Yeah. I'm at Barnes & Noble, both in on the web and in the bookstores.
How do you spell your name? So make sure everybody knows that's how you end your name.
Torgersen.
That's E,
Norwegian.
and that's not O-N, that's
correct.
E-N.
It's good. It's good Norwegian E on the end of that. Yeah,
okay,
correct.
Good.
Correct.
So that's on Amazon. Do you also have social?
Yeah, most people can find me on Facebook. I'm close to the limit of about 5,000, but I've got a few dozen friend spots left. So if you want to find me and friend me on Facebook, please do. I've also got a page on Facebook. Same thing. Just look for Brad Torgersen.
Good.
That's the way I interact with most of the fans. Social media probably on too much, but I am available there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Brad. It's been
thank you, John. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to the Rise to Feature podcast. Rise to Feature was a contest started by L. Ron Hubbard in 1983 to provide a means for the aspiring writer a chance for their creative efforts to be seen and acknowledged. The Rise to Feature podcast is available on several platforms. Please subscribe and listen to our episodes as they come out. Thank you.